coming up, some housekeeping. So hello and welcome. And I'm Amy Robinson. I'm the founder of NEXXT. And we are just so excited that you're here today. This is our very first Next Up conversation. And today we are in a webinar format, and we will be recording today. So you will be able to share it and see it again. Well, we can't see you. We know that you're there. So again, please feel free to say hello to us and each other in the chat. Let us know where you're from. If you already have questions building, please feel free to put them in there. We want to encourage all of your questions and comments and continue using chat as well as the Q&A feature. Or we would love to hear from you live. So if you use the raise hand feature that is next to your name under participants, we can unmute you and you can just ask live. So finally, please send a message to all panelists. If for any reason we can't see your full name, we want to thank you for being here later. And we'll also send you a survey so that we can make some improvements. So I'm hoping that you found the Next Up conversation because you either follow us on social media or because you joined our community and you receive our Next News emails. Those Next News emails will become more and more important because they'll be where you get exclusive content like today's recording. So please be sure to click join on our homepage, nextwomen.com. We're going to post that in the chat and share it with friends and colleagues because we want to be able to get you all the inside scoop all the time. If you are new to NEXXT completely, you have no idea why you're here or who we are. Maybe you stumbled in the right place. You're in the right place. You just clicked it. Maybe you stumbled upon us, or maybe you just saw Elise's name and you were like, yes, I want to talk with her. We are a catalyst community for women, and we are here to get you from where you are to where you want to be. We want to motivate, inspire, and support you toward what's next for you. We have our Next Up community conversations and events like today, and we also have coaching groups. Those are designed and facilitated by me, and you can find those on our website. We have a group starting in April, so please be sure to check that out. Again, I'm Amy Robinson, and I founded NEXXT after 4 years and 1 pandemic. Of being the founder of Tribe of Women. And during those years, our organization's mission was to build cultures of women supporting women. And now through NEXXT, we invite you to participate in that culture and discover what happens when women come together in a brave space like here today, where we can boldly strive toward our confident, defined path for yourself and your life. We are learning every day too. So we are thrilled to have you with us on this journey. Now, I'm not going to take up one more moment of our time with Elise, so please join me in welcoming her. Hello, Elise.
Hi, Amy. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm good. You can find all things biography about Elise at elisemitchell.com. So I'm not going to belabor her accolades, although they are many and they are very well earned. So instead, I thought we would start with a little story about how I remember us getting to know each other, that I feel truly exemplifies who you are and how you brought that to what you do. So if you will jump in with me, because I know I haven't told you what I was going to say.
I want to hear this. I hope it's good.
We all have different. We all have different stories of how we met somebody in our lives, and you probably have a different recollection of the first time we encountered each other, and this definitely wasn't the first time, but what I do remember is that I was new to the area and I had just been asked to start a local chapter of World Women in IT, WorldWit, and we were going to be called ArcWit. If anybody out there remembers that, just go ahead and say over here, and then I will, I'll know how old you are. No, I'm just kidding. I'll know. I've been around for a minute. But part of this role was to host events, and I was still in my late 20s. And again, I'm dating myself, but I was charging forward completely blind, and I decided to have a lunch and learn. As you do, you're just like, an event, that's what I'm going to do. And I think you and I, Elise, maybe had been introduced, but I don't know that we really knew me from anyone else. But I reached out and you reached back and you showed up, and our lunch and learn was amazing. And that act of you showing up helped establish me as a leader, and the support helped me feel confident in what I was or what I was trying to do. And you showed up every time since. every time I've asked, including today.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. But isn't that what we do for each other, right? We need to show up for each other, whatever showing up means.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just listening and say, go ahead and cry on my shoulder a
Yeah.
little bit, or
Or
let me
it's,
cry on
hey,
yours. Yeah.
or it's, hey, go talk to this person, which you've done for me as well.
Yeah.
So this is both a thank you as well as a foundation for our conversation today. And because I do feel like a lot of what we're talking about today is how to get through life's changes and the challenges, and how we do that by being who we are and for showing up for each other. So I just want to dive right in. We have been through a thing together collectively as a world. And I think that I know you are gearing up to really address that head on with a webinar that we'll talk about a little bit later. That is kind of a culmination, but it really is, like we're saying within NEXXT, what next? And your talk is what now? And it's true about, how do we change? What do we need to know to succeed? And one of the things that, you and I have talked about, and I know I've talked with a lot of women here and they're here today, as well as in other capacities, about just priority shifts, like how so many things that were important are not important anymore, or that were not important are suddenly important. Little things like, friends that we didn't reach out to that we suddenly couldn't see, or we didn't hop in a plane and go see somebody and now we absolutely couldn't. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that and kind of what you're seeing in some of your coaching and just observationally.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I do remember our quit. And I've loved you ever since I've met you, and you've always showed up for me too. So I'm so glad that we've been able to help each other and run alongside each other. This, I think we have all realized more than ever we need community. And when it's taken from you, it's just an eye opener, like what do I need to be doing to ensure I have community, which isn't to say that our communities can change too over time as we grow in our professions, our careers, our lives. Sometimes we sort of have a pruning effect, where some people sort of leave our community and then other people join, and then there's some of those tried and true faithful friends that are with you all the way. But I think your point is well taken, is that we are experienced some loss in community, and now hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now we're starting to see that coming back, but we probably also learned a bit that we don't have to rely on being in person. There are other skills and other ways that we can cultivate relationship and build networks and things like that are maybe a little bit different than we would have thought in the past, but they're still important for us to tap into those other people in our lives so that we have a sense of community. I think that's crucial.
I love that. And I love that you say that I do find that we don't often give ourselves permission for people to ebb and flow in and out of our lives. And, we feel guilty for not having contacted someone for a while. But then, that person just goes away, and really to reach out even after a long time and just say, I've been thinking about you. And I think that has been something, a gift of the pandemic, if you want to call it that, that we've realized that we can reach out for no reason at all. And also the seasonality of things, the different times and stages of life that we're in. I think a lot of people, especially with children, and I'd love to hear from all of you about some of the things that you are prioritizing or reprioritizing right now, and as you're kind of looking at what now and what's next, what that kind of looks like for you. But a lot of people with kids bubbled up and just said, these are the people that we must have, right now in order to get through this together. And those people may not be your forever, for now and forever friends, right? They may not, but it's okay that they are there for you right then and there.
I remember hearing something one time about as you move through the different stages of life, your friends do change and evolve, and that's okay. So, for what you just said, made me think about, I remember that stage of life when our children were younger. They're both in their 20s now, so they're grown. But when they were younger, the parents of my children's friends were my friends very often, not always, but very often. You do things together, or you're in the same sort of sports program or whatever it may be. And so you sort of fell into those relationships. Some of those were great, great gifts, but then some of them fade away over time as your children grow up and you don't see those people. And there's, I think, kind of a beauty in being able to, at a certain stage of life, pick your friends if you can, and I'm at the stage now where my children are grown. I feel like I do have a bit more freedom to say, well, who do I want in that community? Who's on my personal board of directors, or who do I want to keep close? And it isn't that you don't want to have a lot of people still in your sphere, but there's only so many people that you're really going to be able to sort of stay very sort of intimately connected to in terms of things that are going on in your life. And I think that's the beauty of having, is, of course, you taught all of us about having a tribe. I always think of that as, have a tribe of women, particularly, that are your go-to, those sort of 4 or 5 people, maybe even, I don't know, there'd be that much more than that, but 4 or 5 people is like, when the chips are down or when the fire is burning, you can text or call and they're like, I'm on the plane, or I'm right there for you, or call me, what do you need? If you find me in a fetal position, all you have to do is raise a finger and I'm going to be there for you, right? That's a tribe. And I think there's some real beauty for cultivating and selecting that for different stages of your life, that are because you have picked them because of what that that they mean to you.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that is, and we also have to give each other space to grow and change.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is sometimes you grow apart. You may be going through different things in your life, and you may grow apart, but that way you can choose and, continue to filter and prioritize and reprioritize. I think that one of the things, interestingly enough, about the pandemic is there may have been people in our lives that that were just kind of there. And then when they were gone, we realized maybe that they weren't very healthy for us. Maybe they weren't. And so, addressing some of those things and going back in and finding out how to, I really liked your, pruning is a good, I've heard people use purge, but I like prune. That's very,
well,
very seasonal.
Here's one of the nice things about the idea of pruning, is that when we prune relationships in our life, it doesn't have to be with for a fault. It could be just, it's time and it's okay to prune. What you do is you create space for new growth. And I love that, because, it's when the sort of the bushes are overgrown and you have too much stuff going on, is when you prune it back, that you force the plant to put the growth into a few strong shoots, that then the new growth comes out, which often can be much more preferable for the long-term strength and health of our lives. So I do sort of like that idea, is that pruning's not a bad thing. It can be a very healthy thing to create new space for new growth.
I love it. And we are in spring. It is the season.
Yes.
And and kind of getting on the other side of things. Good. Yes. Well, again, feel free to post what some of the priorities that have shifted in your lives, and some of the things that you're thinking about when it comes to priorities. I think the other space where priorities are shifting, Elise, is workplace. Women have been at the front line lately, and losing jobs, being caregivers, having the opportunity to work from home, and maybe in some cases finding a little more work-life integration. No balance, there's no such thing, but
and maybe work-life blending.
blending, integration. Yes, and so I've also heard of women starting to really enjoy that, and really looking at that as, I kind of like this, flexibility and ability to do that. And I've, talked to women that now that things are starting to go back to work, offices are opening, they kind of want the choice for something different. So I think that falls into priorities, and just kind of what it is that we're finding works for us, what has been required of us, being at the office 8 to 5, and then having some flexibility and going, wait a minute, I can reprioritize my day and still get things done. Or there are also, people that I've talked to are like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love going to the office.
I think of this a little bit like this idea of sort of shedding the shoulds in our life. We
Yes.
sort of have these shoulds, like I should be doing this, or the world expects me to look or do or be or have a title or have a role or take on or whatever it may be. We sort of have these shoulds in our life. And what I do think the pandemic, at least in the clients that I'm working with now, I've seen is it did force the step back and observe and reflect, which is always healthy for us to do in life. But then to say, well, I don't know, is that a should that I want to keep? Is that something I feel like is true for me? Or maybe it's not. Maybe that was true for the generation above me, or maybe that was true for me pre-pandemic as opposed to post, things like that. And giving yourself permission to say, maybe I think I want to try something different, or maybe I want to pivot in my career and in my life, or try reapportioning my time and energy in different ways, and sort of letting go of those shoulds to get a little bit more in touch with what I really want and what I think I am called to be as a leader.
Well, and we've got a couple of thank you for posting, Catherine and Shava. The internal focus that we have. We do have all of these, external forces, literally in some cases, coming in on us, coming at us. And in some ways, what they're commenting on is that opportunity to focus internally. And, I like excavating at home rather than seeking outward. I love that. That's very poetic.
Good.
Thank you. We'll keep that one. And also caring for ourselves. So, through all of this, I know at one point in time, I was getting up in my pajamas, sitting down in front of my computer, and I'd walk out of the office at 5 o'clock in my pajamas or later. That wasn't self-care. That was a lot of pressure and a lot of other things. And honestly, I, had health challenges that manifested from that. And so self-care, really isn't a joke, and it's not something that we can. I do think that definitely has come out as a something that we have to do in order to be more productive.
I agree. I agree, and I think I've seen in the pandemic this. One of the benefits has been an appreciation and awareness, and maybe even a deeper understanding of the importance of mental health. And of course, with a lot of leaders, that's an uncomfortable space, because I'm thinking, well, how do I help and I've had a lot of my coaching clients in my executive coaching practice have said, how am I supposed to care for the mental health of my people? Like, do I hire a mindfulness coach, or there's so many things you can do, but I always say, start by just being authentic to understand not only what they're going through, but to be vulnerable to share what you've been going through, and to show some humanity, like be real, be relatable, show up as a real person, not as sort of perfect and polished, but like, this is what I've been struggling with, and help your people see that, give them permission to be human. Because again,
Absolutely.
that's the shoulds, it's like, I'm supposed to show up in a certain way. I can't let you know, or it's a sign of weakness if I tell people, et cetera, et cetera. So I like, Catherine's point too about being more about self-care. I love that at least now in the workplace, there's much more open conversation around the whole person, and wanting there to be a place for work that is healthy, because so many of us in the pandemic did overwork. I wrote a blog post on that I think in December, because I just kept seeing that as a pattern. It's like, oh my goodness, people are working way more than they did before. They can't find the separation. They can't turn it off. They feel like they're always on, even more than before. So you got to sort of be aware of both tendencies, the sort of the drifting away and becoming disengaged, and overworking and becoming completely burned out.
Well, and that's the accessibility of technology, right? Even, our phones, as we started working more with phones, and when to turn it off and when to put it down and when to, check out, and what are the patterns that we've got in our days. And we've got some great comments about in the chat about mental health, and not waiting until
Yeah.
we've crashed, not waiting until we are sick, and our excuse for going to bed is because we have completely depleted. Melissa says taking a nap. Like, give yourself a permission slip to do that before it's too late, before it's a crisis.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Amy, of course, you know my story, but I sort of the essence of my leadership journey was around the fact that I was a workaholic, and I was an entrepreneur. So I was building a company, Mitchell Communications Group, for those in Northwest Arkansas that might know of my firm, my former firm that I built, and loved it like a third child. But, I poured myself into it for way too many years, pretty exclusively, and everything else in my life was suffering. And so I did experience that personal anguish and pain of being a workaholic and seeing other parts of your life really suffer. And then coming to this sort of existential crisis of, well, wait a minute, like, what am I doing all this for? And that was really a key moment, sort of, because I was such a there person, like I'm going to get there. And then once we get there, we're going to get to there, get there. It's just that constant driven, goal oriented, because it was never enough. Honestly, I think I was a bit of an achievement addict, and had a lot of my self-identity and self-worth tied up in the success of my company, which is very common in entrepreneurs. You just pour so much of yourself into it, but also beginning to say, I don't think this is all there is to life. And of course I knew intellectually that wasn't it, but sort of knowing is very different from being and doing. You can know things, but not be or do them. And so you have to get to the underlying issue. What am I afraid of? What's holding me back? What is keeping me from making change that I know would be useful for me? And this is this idea, I think, of, the limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves as well, because I think I'm supposed to, or, for me, it was, well, gosh, I'm really afraid that if my company fails, maybe people won't think I'm smart, or maybe, I have done all this work for nothing. And, so I was viewing failure as this sort of commentary on my abilities. And it wasn't until I faced failure, of course, that I began to go, oh, like everybody fails. And actually, failure, I always say, from your lowest lows can come your highest highs. Certainly that was true for me.
Absolutely.
And I just didn't know it, and so we overwork because we're so afraid of imposter syndrome or that inner critic that's telling us things. And, being able to sort of have a healthy separation, step back and go, oh, well, what is it that really is meaningful to me, and what would give me purpose and fulfillment and joy, and that I don't need the accolades of the world. I really, and that's what I said, Elise, focus more on your own self-respect, earn that first, and everything else will follow. But don't focus and worry about what other people think of you. What do you think about yourself? And that was a huge, like, oh, well, duh. I should have figured that out a long time ago.
Well, and it's interesting how we can hear that, like you're saying, you could know it, but are you doing it? My mom used to say, you're the person you have to live with for the rest of your life. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever, Mom, moving on. But that really resonates now. I'm like, oh, like, really, people are going to come and go. And, but I am the person I'm living with for the rest of my life. And I think that, I say a lot, it's about bringing who you are to what you do. Not the other way around. And we are very externally, as it was already mentioned, when we're following the externals and our guide is not the internal, then that's where, we do get to, and honestly, in part of the reason that NEXXT exists is because what's next comes up in those huge transitions in our lives that are going to happen. Change is the only constant. And, but what I was seeing was women were, it was at times when it was job changing. Maybe you went from a VP of a company and now you're retired. What does that look like? You go from being a stay-at-home mom to having a job, or vice versa, go from having a job to being a stay-at-home mom. And it was these title shifts that were the struggle.
Mhm.
And what was interesting to me is that we are going from title to title, external, but who we are hasn't changed.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I love that, Amy. It makes me think about, there's an article, I want to recommend an article. I'm big on resources and reading
yay,
and learning
yeah,
from all these smart people in the world who have ideas to share. There's a great article that was in Harvard Business Review. It's called Moments of Greatness. I think Catherine's probably heard me share this before in some of my workshops that she's been in. Moments of Greatness, written by a guy named Robert Quinn. And it's a good article. He talks about that there are these times in our lives as leaders where most of the time we're sort of operating in a normal sort of mode of thinking and doing and being. But there are these moments of time, of almost like some moments in crisis a lot of times, where we rise to our best selves. We rise to the challenge. We become our best version of ourselves. And he said, are there ways to capture these, like, I'm at my very best when this is happening, and make that more common in your daily life without a crisis? And so I saw that happen in the pandemic, is that people were sort of forced into this rising to the challenge, this moments of greatness because of this huge impact on their lives. But there was a key thing I loved out of the article that when you said something made me think of it. The idea between the internal and the external is this concept of, can I be internally driven, which is I'm driven by my values, my beliefs, my purpose, my calling, sort of the intrinsic values that I have and the way I'm filled up intrinsically about joy and satisfaction, fulfillment. And so internally driven, but externally focused, which means I'm thinking about you, and I'm thinking about others, and I'm thinking about community, and I'm thinking about how I impact the world for good. So I'm not focused on myself, I'm focused on others, but I'm driven from within. And to me, that was kind of a real sweet spot of, wow, I need to work on myself, as was said in the chat, build myself up. I mean, encourage and be more authentic to myself, and then focus that externally in the world. And I think the funny thing about all that is we show up in a very confident way when we are like that.
yes, yes. Well, and confidence is a challenging word, and it's an outcome of the coaching that we do in NEXXT. But it's complicated for women, because what does confidence look like? And definitely it's coming from inside. And I think one of the other things, and one of the things that you talk about a lot is and you've talked about is pivoting. So, and how to prepare for that. So in context of all of a sudden things happening and us rising to those occasions, I think a lot of people are pivoting right now. One, because we're reprioritizing. One, because we know a little bit more about ourselves that maybe we didn't know before. I talk a lot about the introvert extrovert spectrum. If you didn't know, you do now. Like, where you are on the spectrum. I have, women that are like, I didn't really think I was as extroverted as I was, but the lack of human contact and connection was just stifling. And then I have women that thought, well, I thought I was extroverted, but I'm kind of good with, having less all the time. So you definitely know a little bit more. And so, pivots sound very sudden. They sound very, you just make up your mind one day, but you talk about how you can prepare for those. So I feel like there's kind of a balance between, preparing for a pivot and then just kind of knowing when it's ready. We actually had a question. So we do have some questions from you, just from our social media, and we want everybody to continue to ask questions, make your fantastic comments. And Shannon just shared something, which is awesome, with each other. So you guys are chatting with each other. Yes, I love it. And again, feel free to raise your hand next to where you are as a participant if you just want to ask something live. But we did have one, and one was, when do you know when to pivot?
That's the question. So I'll tell, and I've shared this story with you, I'll share with the group. Last summer, I guess it's about maybe June. So when it kind of became clear to us that this was going to not be a sprint, but a marathon, I started getting calls from people who were saying, I can't do this anymore, whatever this is. I've got to do something else, but I have no idea what to do. Can you help me figure that out? And I was like, well, I don't know. They said, well, you did it. You pivoted, you built your firm, you sold it, and then you moved on, which, to what I'm doing now, which is coaching, leadership development, sort of a different career path. You did the pivot. How did you do it? I thought, well, I have to really think about that, because if I'm going to help somebody else figure it out, I need to sort of put a process in place. So long story short, I created a 6-step process that I call planning your pivot. And it's around this whole idea of people having this sort of realization of, I can't do this anymore, whatever this is. And it is a wonderful, I always say, this is when all the fun begins, when you have the realization that what's the status quo in your life can't remain. You've got to make a change. You don't know what, that's where the fear sets in,
Right.
And it helps to have somebody, who can kind of guide you, a Sherpa, if you will, to kind of coach you through it is nice. But in that process of running alongside these, now I've had about a half a dozen people go through that process. And I have learned so much from them, watching them go through the discovery process, because for everybody it's different. And I always tell them, I'm not going to be able to tell you what to do. You don't need me to tell you what to do. I'll help you figure out what it is you want.
Yeah.
And I'll hopefully ask you all the right questions that will prompt your thinking. And then hopefully then give you the courage to begin taking some steps in that direction. And for me, what I learned was I began thinking about pivoting probably 4 or 5 years before I actually did pivot. And that was partly because I began to recognize how meaningful it was to me to complete where I was with grace and love and excellence. So it means, you don't run away from something, you run to something, but in doing so, you want to be thoughtful and mindful and intentional about how you complete with other people. And so that was really important to me, to be able to wait to leave my firm till it was a good time for everybody else, not just for me. And that was, I needed to be patient. It took me about 2 more years to go through that process than when I was sort of mentally ready, but I knew it wasn't right for everybody else yet. And so you have to be thoughtful about that. And then there's sometimes where a pivot is sort of placed on you, like you lose your job or you have to move and something changes pretty dramatically. And I always call those detours, Amy. You know me and my journey.
Hey, yeah, I have your book. That's right.
Oh, you have my book. Okay, so yeah, and the detours in life. And I say, you know what? The detours are going to happen. They're not your plan A. They're probably not even your plan B or plan C. Yeah. They happen. And the key there is just to have the courage to stay on the journey, because even in the detours, we come to these magnificent places that we never could have imagined for ourselves. And there's beauty in all of that. And it can make you wiser, stronger, faster. Is you got to say, okay, so this is where I'm going. I used to say, are you going to go and let this change make you bitter? Or are you going to go and let this change make you better? Bitter or better? It's all up here. You get to decide, and that's kind of nice to know is, actually, I'm in control here. I can choose to be a victim or angry or upset or hope it fails. Or I could say, let's go, what an exciting detour to be on. Wonder where the journey is going to take me now. And you have to go with that mindset to find the beauty that is going to come next.
Well, and I think that, the wisdom of everybody that's on here and sharing, as well as what you're sharing, is that in preparing for your pivot, one of the best things you can do is not be in that crisis state where you do run away. Taking care of yourself, your mental health, and really, digging into what is it that drives you? Who are you? What do you want? It's especially when, culturally women are givers, and, we're putting other people ahead of us constantly. And, I've done presentation, called Yes Women. And, the catch is you need to say yes to yourself first. Mm-hmm. It's the, put your own mask on before, because if you are depleted, if you are empty, if there is nothing left of you, focusing externally and giving to others is not going to happen. You're going to have the crashes, you're going to run away. The pivot is going to be, not thought through, and that there will be something that happens along those lines. And so yay, every Zoom needs a puppy.
I know. I was going to say, I had a dog that's for 5 minutes been circling my chair going, I want up, I want up. I thought, I don't think this is going to get any better. So anyway, my apologies, but Willie is now where he wants to be. So all is good.
Fantastic.
So.
That's great. Well, that's one of the gifts, right? Of everything that we've gone through is just kind of being in people's homes. And so I completely agree with that. And, you know, a lot of, obviously all of the curriculum design that we've designed and the programs that we have are all about you figuring out what you want, where you want to go and how you want to get there, so that when those sudden changes happen, or when you have the aha moment and go, you know what, this isn't for me, there is a community of support, there is a path for yourself. You know, I like to say plan, but really it's just a path, because like you write in your book, you know, yours is about riding your motorcycle. I think of walking through a forest and, you know, just having all of these options and making these choices. So
yeah, you know, it's funny too, Amy, is that back to this core idea about, do I know myself? You know, if I really examined and understood and gotten in touch with who I am first, that really drives a pivot too, because you may have lots of opportunities presented to you, or people throw things your way. You know, you just don't want to say yes just because somebody wants you, because we all want to be wanted. That's really nice to be wanted. But is it really what I should be doing? And so that's been a bit of an eye-opener for me, even in the pivot I have now, where at different times people have come to me to say, oh, well, we would love for you to join us or do this. And I've had to sit and think about that. Well, it's nice to be wanted. Is that really what I should be doing? Is that really the best use of my time and talent? Is it my passion? Am I fulfilling my purpose and my calling that I believe God has me to be doing and focusing on right now? And so that's a different conversation, because then it's like, oh, there maybe is an opportunity here, but am I in touch with myself enough to know whether it's the right opportunity for me? And that begs that question, is I got to go back to the beginning and figure out my strengths, my values, my purpose, you know, sort of all these things about me, if I'm in touch with it. And then it becomes more obvious to me what might be the right decision for me to make at this point in time.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, in a lot of the coaching that I've done, one of the filters that we use is fear and ego. Is if you are making a decision based on fear, which you've talked about, or ego, maybe it's, you know, you really need to revisit that. And one of those in ego, so job choice is a great example. Somebody tells you that you're good. So I'm good at spreadsheets, and somebody can tell me that I'm good at spreadsheets, but I don't like them. I am good at them once I get there. And I have, you know, I was in banking for a long time. I was a paralegal for a long time. And I didn't realize how much energy that took, and how it really, but we do that a lot. You're really good at this. We also have to remember that sometimes people are telling us we're good at something because they need that job done.
Right.
And so we really need to say, is this for me? Is this right for me? And then the fear that happens a lot is that opportunity isn't going to come along again, or that opportunity, nobody's going to ask again. And we really need to get through that and over that and know there will be, if we are on our own path going in, you know, the honest direction for us, then there will be other opportunities.
I like that. That's really great. I think that plays to a lesson I've learned in working with some folks on their pivot, is that there's a measure of patience that you need to have, because the answer doesn't just pop out of the sky, you know, like, oh, I'm supposed to do this, you know, it's written in the sky for me. And I know people want that, or they hope I'm going to be able to give them that. And I always say, you know, be patient, wait for it to become clearer to you of what it might be, because it may not be the right time, or as a lot of things are in life, it's just fortuitous that the opportunity arises when you're ready. This was kind of an interesting insight. One of my clients, this was a huge aha for me to watch her growth. And she said, what I've realized through this process was the pivot I needed to make was in my own mind. I was looking for a change in a job to fix what was wrong inside. but, through the process that she had felt like I needed to make the pivot first. And I told her, I said, you know what, that's so amazing that you've had that great insight. Kudos to you for the growth that you've made to see that. And then I told her, I said, I have a feeling that the opportunities are going to come along at the right time because you're more ready now, and you are showing up differently because you did the work within to sort of change yourself, and that's sort of like when we sort of till the soil and cultivate our own field, that we plant the seeds and the growth will come, but it takes time for those sprouts to come out of the ground. And when there's a lot of tilling and a lot of watering and a lot of weeding and a lot of fertilizing that we do on ourselves before we see that growth. And I think there's something sort of nice about that idea, is that, if I do the work, I will trust that things will come that really are right for me when I am ready for the opportunity. Yeah,
absolutely. I love that. Well, I want to make sure that we're cognizant of everybody's time, make sure that you are putting any questions that you have out there for us. We have had some other questions, and I really liked this one that was, I appreciate the little things, but how is that helping me deal with the big things? And, we've seen this a lot, and we've seen a lot about people appreciating. We just had this conversation right before we got on here. You posted a picture of the tulip that's blooming, and we just have a much greater appreciation for some of the little things in our lives. And we see that again over and over and over again. And I feel like this person is maybe kind of saying, how is that becoming cliche? How is focusing on the little things and appreciating the little things? I feel like everybody is feeling very overwhelmed right now. Let's just say that. I think that, another one was talking about envisioning something better for themselves when they really just feel like they're just trying to survive right now.
Yeah.
So, when things feel so big, and, how do we not say, just appreciate the little things and everything will be okay. And, that my silver lining is your silver lining, and not do that, but really empathize with where people are right now.
I love that both of those questions and ideas are really valuable, because it makes me think about this idea of gratitude. Have we learned the art of gratitude? Are we being grateful in our lives? So that would apply to little things as well as big things. But I think sometimes it's easier to practice on the little things, like the tulips that are starting to bloom in your front yard, is you're practicing gratitude. I have one of the tools and techniques that I teach my clients is to have what I call a moment of gratitude every day. And the idea is you're trying to train your mind to be more focused on appreciating the things that are good in your life. And there's always something, even in the worst of circumstances, we can always point to something. I remember at my lowest times, I would sit and think, you just on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is this really? And I would say, it's probably a 14. I mean, it's just horrible. It's off the charts awful. Nothing is good. Everything is bad, And then I would sit there and go, yeah, but not really. I mean, I've got my health. I did at that time. I had a family that loved me. I had an agency and a company that I was patient to put up with me. I mean, there's still a lot of blessings that we can point to. We just don't do it enough. And so the moments of gratitude, what I teach my clients is, hey, I have this thing every morning I get up, when I first open my eyes and I look up at the ceiling and I see the light fixture in our bedroom. And the idea is the visual cue of the light fixture is, how can I shine a spotlight on one good thing in my life today? One thing. And it's the first thing that comes to mind. So no judgment, doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be small. It could just be the first thing, so just the first thing that I think about. And saying, yeah, you know what? I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that's in my life. And then you just get on with your day. And the idea is you begin to train your mind to begin thinking a little more opportunistically and a little more positively, as opposed to focusing on the negative, which we can easily do. That's rumination. That's inner critic. That's being cynical. We've all been there. I don't show up very well when I'm like that. In fact, at one point I had people in my company who would say to me, Elise, we don't like how you've become bitter and cynical, how some of these challenges are changing you. We like the old Elise better. And that was when you begin to realize, wow, like as a leader, we seep all over other people. We don't think anybody can tell. And of course, they look at my face. I'm not very good at poker, but they can look at my face and see in a moment how I'm thinking or feeling. And the idea there is I've got to master inside first, and coming out with a little bit more of an appreciation will actually begin to help me start seeing more of those types of things. And even with the big things then to say, wow, you know what? That's actually been good. I mean, there's sort of there's a proverb, I think it's like a story about the Zen farmer, where there's a little story about him where he says, the villagers come to him and they say, oh, is this good or is this bad? And the villagers say, oh, this is good in your life. Something good happened, and he said, I don't know. Is it good or is it bad? And they come back the next day and what they thought was good has turned out to be bad.
Bad.
Yeah. And then they say, oh my goodness, this is so bad. Like the farmer has a son and he breaks his leg. They say, oh, it's just so terrible. Your son broke his leg. That's so bad. He says, I don't know. Is it good or is it bad? And the next day, there's a conscription and there's a call to war, and all of the young men in the country have to go off to war, but the son doesn't go because he's broken his leg. So is it good or is it bad? So it kind of teaches you is I need to stop being so judgmental about what happens in my life and say, I don't know, it could be good. It seems bad, but there may be something good in this for me. And that's part of where we have to sort of be patient to let life unfold and for us to seek the good things, even in the bad.
I love that. Well, you have a very specific comment and question about that, and using the good and the bad about, that everything is slowed down, and there has been kind of a collective breath that has been taken, and that, some of us are enjoying that. And do you think that once we're all safe, things go back to, the pace that they were at, that it'll go back to that? If it'll just go right back to where we were, do you feel like the time that has passed is going to be something that's forever changed us, both for good and the bad?
It's a great question. And really that might beg another question for us to ask ourselves is, well, I don't know, am I going to let that happen?
Right. I think that's
what have I learned? How have I changed? What needs to change in my life? How do I exert more control over the schedule and the life that I want to have? And can I manage more proactively? I work with a lot of my clients, very high level executives who you would think have this all figured out. And they're like, I don't have time to be strategic. I don't have time to think. And I'm like, well, now are you running your calendar? Is your calendar running you?
Exactly.
And how do you take back a little more control to pace yourself and give yourself time for focus and deep work and time for relationships and time to invest in yourself and all that. So I honestly think it is up to us as individuals, but overall, I don't think it's going to go back that way. I think people are more cognizant of the fact that time is short. We don't know how much time we have. That's been made very obvious to us over the last year. And it makes you think of, what am I doing with the gift of the time that is here for me right now? I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have today. How do I make the most of today? And how do I want to be able to, sort of this idea of living with intention. So how do I set my intentions for today to make the most of today, to focus on the 2 or 3 things where I want to show up with excellence today, and be able to go to bed tonight to say it was a good day. I was able to do and be what God wanted me to be. And for me to feel that I was more intentional about how I lived my day. And that could be a better way for us to be in the future.
I think it also makes me think, Elise, and is thinking about we only have control over ourselves ultimately. If we're constantly trying to control the outside forces that are coming in, we'll constantly be disappointed. What we do, one, we have control over our own actions. How, exactly what you're saying, how are you going to engage in the world? What are you going to change in your life or keep in your life? Again, back to, workspace, if you're working or thinking of going back to work or any of those things, what is going to work best for you, and how do you advocate for that? How do you make sure that happens in your life? And in some cases, people will change jobs in order to get that. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, imagine a world where women walked away from everything that does not serve them.
Men would be up the creek.
I know, the world would stop running.
That's
But if we walk toward the things that do serve us, and put that stake in the ground that this is what I need and this is where I need it, then I think culturally there will be. So in that we do have influence. We don't have control, but we do have influence, and making sure that that influence is coming from what we need and where we need it. And that comes from that deep self-knowledge that we're talking a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that comment. We have a couple of other things. So just putting it out there, was the pandemic good or bad? Agrees that don't think that things will go back to the way it was. People forever changed and assess and live more intentionally. Yeah. So was the pandemic good or bad? I keep saying, almost guiltily, there are some gifts of the pandemic that have happened. There are also some really, really terrible things that have happened in people's life individually. And so, when I think about, I love Brene Brown, so I go to her example of empathy and, not silver lining things for people. But I do think it's okay if you found a silver lining. If you found something that is a gift of the pandemic, if you found something that you're doing better or you want to do differently, I do think that that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So definitely the pandemic was bad in many, many ways. Of course, loss of life, as an entrepreneur, it breaks my heart to see people's livelihoods at stake. That was so hard for me to watch. I just wanted to swoop in and rescue all those entrepreneurs. I know it's so hard. I know your work has been very focused on that. My heart has just been broken for so many entrepreneurs and people who are working for small businesses, and they're just trying to get by. I mean, that's been so hard to watch. But on the other hand, while those forces are larger than all of us and can't, hopefully those things will come back into play for people. I do think that a timeout or a pause, if you will, however you want to think about it, anything that makes us stop and reflect and face the challenge. Sometimes those challenges are within, certainly there was a lot without, but there was a lot within too, where people had a chance to really rethink who they are and what they do. That's really valuable. So in some ways it has been quite good for a lot of people to rethink their life and rethink what they want the rest of their life to be. I shared a devotional thought not long ago with, I'm on the board of trustees for my alma mater, Abilene Christian University, which by the way, had a nice little run in the NCAA basketball tournament. But I was asked to share a devotional thought with one of our at a board of trustees meeting. And I was trying to think, this is back February. I thought, what in the world do you say? It was the week after, or it was actually the Friday of the week of Snowmageddon, when everybody in Texas had been, without power and water. And I thought, what do you say to all of those folks? So what I shared was, it's just a devotional thought on resilience. And this idea of, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the story of the Biosphere 2 trees. That's kind of a great, you can Google the story, Biosphere 2 trees. Basically, the story is this: the Biosphere 2, which was that big geodesic dome in the Arizona desert where people went in to try to live just within the dome for an extended period of time. An interesting finding from Biosphere 2 was that the trees that grew in the dome actually fell over. And the scientists were trying to figure out why. And what they came to realize was that those trees did not experience wind. And so they never developed something called stress wood, which is what makes a tree strong. The wind blowing a tree, it makes it strong. And so if you don't have any wind, you have no real root system, you have no ability to stand. And as you grow, you topple over. And I thought, what a wonderful analogy for how challenge makes us stronger in life. And that when we get older, we would love to be thought of and seen as that tree that its trunk is bending and, molding itself to all the challenge-based life, but its roots are firmly planted and it is still producing fruit. despite all of the challenge. And so I think, you know, we need challenge as much as we don't like it. And I hate it. It makes us stronger. I actually wrote a guide recently and did a workshop on what I call cultivating a resilient spirit for this very reason, is how do we think about resilience in a positive way and see ourselves as better, stronger, happier, more joyful because of some challenge that we faced.
I love that. Everything that you do is very timely. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, you were like, well, I think we're going to do this webinar. And it was huge, hugely received because it was so well timed. And so I love that about it. And so, you know, in our couple of moments, one, in thanking everybody for being here, wanting to let everybody know that Elise has a free webinar coming up. It's on March 30th at 1 o'clock Eastern time, 12 o'clock Central time, and 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's called What Now? How Leadership is Changing and What You Need to Succeed in a New Normal. And or a next normal, or the next one, or the next one,
Whatever's coming.
whatever normal you're in. So we're posting a link to that so you can register for that because it's just in a few days. And if you share this recording or share that webinar with everyone, then they will have that information as well. Tell us a little bit about what people can expect from that webinar, Elise.
Well, I'm excited. I'm doing it with one of my longtime friends and colleagues, Janet Tyler. She's a coach. She built a PR firm just like I did years ago in Detroit and in the tech space. So we've been longtime friends, but we both are now doing coaching. And so I got her to help me, as you mentioned, this time last year, right when lockdown happened, I launched a 4-part series webinar on leadership, and I called it Rising to the Challenge, which is like, what in the world's going on and what do we do about it now? And so it was, had a lot of folks to attend. And from that, we launched our Leadership Academy. We do a virtual 6-week Leadership Academy every couple of months. And so we've got one coming up starting in April. But in that webinar, we'll kind of give a teaser to Leadership Academy, but we'll talk about Jane and I will talk about what are we seeing that has changed for leaders, what's going to stick, what's probably going to go back the way it was. And more importantly, the question is, what do we need to succeed as leaders? Things have changed. Expectations are different for leaders. What is it that we need to be shoring up in terms of our strengths and our capabilities as leaders to really lead successfully into the future? And of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to tell you what I think and what I see from working with all of my clients and what I observe from all the smart people in the world who write and talk about these things. We'll try to curate some of that and share that and just give people an idea of, you know, this is maybe some things I need to be working on in my own leadership skill set.
Well, that is a huge gift. I hope that a lot of people sign up for that. And you being here today has been a huge gift. I thank you so much for continuing to show up, and we will continue to show up for each other. And here at NEXXT, we're showing up for you. So please continue following us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and check out our upcoming Next Up conversations and events. If you go to the website, we have a really cool one coming up in April that we're about to announce. And please do go out and explore the coaching programs at nextwomen.com. Again, we are starting in a group in April, and exactly what we're talking about today is exactly what those groups are about. It's a group coaching. I facilitate them. The curriculum is designed by me, and it is all about bringing who you are to what you do and what that path is going to look like. So you are also welcome to reach out to us directly at hello@nextwomen.com. We'll go ahead and put that in the link, but it's HELLO at nextwomen, NEXXTwomen.com. We'd love to hear from you in any capacity. And again, we'll send you a little email after this. And if you sign up if you go to join on the website, make sure that you're getting the NEXXT news. You will get a link to this recording very soon. So thanks everybody for being here. Elise, all day long. Appreciate you.
Love you
so
too.
much.
Thank you for showing up in my life, and thanks for letting me be here today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. We'll see you all again soon.